today about why I'm actually trying out these streams. I am working on a bunch of ideas to do with epistemology, history of science, philosophy of science, all kinds of combinations like that. And basically, I'm trying to get feedback and trying to start conversations. So on Twitter, I've actually done 4 or 5 conversations now with different conversation partners, thought partner type things. Okay, that's an annoying way to say it. But just people that I'm interested in what they're working on and what they're thinking about. So those are on Twitter, and I'm thinking about trying to give some sort of lectures on here. Now, whether that's a good idea or not, I'm not quite sure yet, and I'm not even very good with the technology yet. I'm trying to just get any stream working. I was messing with OBS this morning, and it was not going very well. Tried with Melon app with a friend, and now trying with Restream. And they each seem to have their pros and cons. But hopefully this one is working and going out to YouTube and to Twitch. I want to do some thinking in public, and the last stream I did on Twitch was devoted to what's called the Zettelkasten, which is basically just a way of structuring knowledge. It's a way of kind of saving and bookmarking things that I'm interested in. It was largely inspired by this book that came out a few years ago by this guy named Sunke Ahrens, Ahrens. And the book is called How to Take Smart Notes. It is based on a kind of paper system of how to organize information. And for the last 3 years, I've been doing a digital version of that system as I explore philosophy, history, and all the combinations. Philosophy, history, and science are like the kind of big 3 areas that I'm interested in. And I've never really articulated this before, but like, as I became interested in what is science, like how do we know things, I became interested in the history of science and the philosophy of science. So basically, like, you've got science doing some kind of investigation of nature, and yet science as a thing done by humans arises historically, right? So there's these developments over time that have led to something like the scientific method, if you want to call it that, or just regardless of whether we get into that question of like, is science a method? Is it not a method? When we say science, we seem to mean something by it. And anything that means something to us as humans also has a history, and it has a sort of birthplace or origin or set of origins in time. So I started getting interested in how did this thing called science come about? And so there's kind of the historical aspects. You know, you might look into people that we now see as somehow instrumental or really important within science. People like Einstein and Newton come up. You might think of Darwin or Lavoisier in chemistry. Darwin in biology, Lavoisier in chemistry. But there's all sorts of other people, like you can probably think of many, many more. And it's like, those are historical people that lived. Now, one position is that I think this is Hans Reichenbach. I could be wrong, but Thomas Kuhn talks about this distinction between, what do you call it? The context of, am I going to get this right? Justification versus the context of discovery. I think that's it. In fact, since I've got you up, I might as well just talk. I might as well just use my system and explain what I'm up to. Yeah, so it is Reichenbach. So the distinction that Kuhn is bringing up and attributes to Reichenbach is the idea that although scientific discoveries, are based in history, like we invent the telescope, humans invent the telescope, and that allows these observations, and then you quote unquote discover some kind of pattern and then use that to do some kind of reasoning, that the context of justification is ahistorical. This is Reichenbach's claim. So basically saying that, yes, a single human makes the discovery on behalf of humanity. Like the assumption is that there is this external objective world out there waiting to be discovered by humans. Then humans discover it, and then they have to justify their discoveries. And that although a human that looks at these stars is born into a history and a context and a culture and all that kind of stuff, that the scientific discoveries made by that human are independent of context, they're independent of history, and they're sort of contextless. They once they're discovered, they can never be sort of undiscovered. And so there's all these kind of assumptions baked into that distinction. And so that was just like getting into that with Kuhn. The fact that science does have a history, like even if you only think that the individual people have a history, they do have a history. The ideas also have a history, and then you can kind of debate the degree to which the context of justification is independent of history. Now, once you get to the question of like, how does science know things, you almost inevitably end up getting into philosophy, and not even necessarily philosophy of science, but just philosophy itself. So I kind of started from this position of philosophy of science because I was interested in revolutions, and I wasn't initially interested in scientific revolutions, as Thomas Kuhn puts them. I was interested in more like, political revolutions, although it's important to know that Kuhn thinks there's an explicit parallel between scientific revolutions and political ones, and especially in the fact that a political revolution is, in a certain sense, extra political, right? As in, you've got one political system with, maybe it's a democracy or maybe it's a monarchy or whatever. It's some kind of stable structure that persists over time. Otherwise, it's not a political system, right? And a revolution, pretty much by definition, upsets that system, and that upset comes from without the system. Because if the system's being reformed from within, let's say, then that's not really called a revolution, right? That's called reform or something like that. So what Kuhn is saying when he calls it a scientific revolution is that actually, just as, you might say, well, if, before and after the French Revolution, let's say, there's these different structures of society or of government, and they're not really compatible with each other, even if many of the same people kind of are around. And the way that the French Revolution happens is not through the normal systems of whatever they've got. I'm sort of vaguely aware that there's this idea of the three estates, which Barbara Tuchman talks about in A Distant Mirror. Basically, the first, I think, is the clergy, the second is the nobility, and the third is the peasantry, or like agrarians, I guess, or just like normal working people. Friend of mine, Sam Biagietti, has called into question how strict these lines are. But the point is that there's this meeting of the third estate, which is like, and I'm going to butcher this, what exactly is happening. It's sometime around this French Revolution. There's this estate that meets up, and a meeting of the multiple estates. So basically the nobility and the third estate, which is just like normal people, and the clergy. In Tuchman's telling, we kind of know what the clergy is. It's, church, like the ordained priests and all the kind of, you know, people that run the Catholic Church, I guess. The nobility in her telling is strictly this martial class, basically. So they start out as warriors, and eventually they kind of become this other thing. Norbert Elias talks a lot about this as well, which is that, you know, they start as this violent class and then they become this kind of social elite that no longer directly enforces violence as perhaps they once did, but that is kind of their roots. Whereas the third estate, I guess, is just kind of living their lives, trying to get by, trying to grow food, trying to do all the stuff that is required. Like they make stuff, I guess they're artisans and craftsmen and all that kind of stuff. So how did I get onto that? Well, just saying that as an example, the French Revolution, like if this meeting of estates, like, you know, the clergy and the nobility and the third estate or whatever, I don't even really know what the third estate is technically. Like if it has another name, I'm probably butchering it. Or anyway, if they had met in this way that had like historical precedent within the French political system, and they had come to some agreement and then, you know, reformed the society from within, and the French Revolution had not happened, then that would be equivalent to what Kuhn sees as normal science, which is basically just that science kind of progresses. Like the problems are well defined, just as political processes under a stable political system might be well defined. Maybe you have elections, maybe you have whatever it is you have. Maybe you just have warlords, but you have some kind of predictable-ish pattern of rituals and behaviors and, you know, kind of timelines and rhythms of doing things. So I got interested in revolutions, and that led me to Thomas Kuhn. And as I've been talking about, Kuhn's got this idea, like I was interested in not strictly political revolutions, but just almost like from the point of view of complexity theory. So like what causes complex systems to kind of invert or change. And I think it's a general principle question. It's not, like, to me, it's not restricted to groups of humans. It's not necessarily, it's not just about political revolutions and scientific revolutions. Like, I think it probably is related to nature. So for example, like, to processes of evolution, variation and selection may also be related to cultural evolution, or even the functioning of like the brain. It may just be like a feature of complex systems. And if that all sounds like extremely hand wavy and vague, that's probably because it is. And I guess to come back to the original point, like, why am I recording this? Like, why am I live right now? I kind of want to start talking through what I've been doing over the past few years. And I don't know whether any of it's going to be interesting, but if it is, then yeah, I want to kind of involve other people into it. And yeah, just open it up, I guess, to questions and things like that. I am going to try to open up the chat thing for Restream, because I think so like, if I understand what's happening here, I am live on YouTube and Twitch, and it seems to be true. I can also see that someone is watching on Twitch. So thank you for watching, if indeed it is not just me watching myself somehow, which is also totally possible. And overall, the idea here is to sort of do drafts of lectures, let's say. So I'll talk about whatever I'm interested in. The first stream I did last week was more about, how does my system work? Like, how do I store things? How do I remember them? Where do they come from? How do I think about where to put things? how do I find them again, and kind of showing off parts of the Zettelkasten. Whereas in this case, I am pretty much just, actually, yeah, if you are listening to this, I've got a chat open. So like, could you put something in the chat if there is anyone watching this? Because I'm curious whether Restream will show it to me. Just say hello and see if it actually shows me anything. So the basic idea is to start getting comfortable with being on camera, improve my ability to speak about the ideas that I'm working on, hopefully get some kind of questions or feedback. What are other people interested in? Get some kind of calibration against the rest of the world, as in, I've been doing all this reading and reading and reading for years now. Like, it's really kind of like, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that I've been doing it with the assiduousness. Which one is it? I've got a script that queries the OED in a terminal, which I'm kind of proud of, actually. Constant or close attention to the business in hand. Yeah, assiduity. Constant or close attention to the business in hand. Unremitting application. Persistent endeavor. Perseverance. Diligence. Persistent endeavor to please. Oh, that's interesting. Obsequious attention, but that's archaic now, except in 2b. So basically, constant attentions is also assiduity. Assiduity? I don't know. For that, I will have to open the actual OED. Assiduousness, close or constant application. So I want to get used to video streams, improve my speaking, try out these ideas, see if anyone's interested in them, take questions live if people have questions. And if I end up delivering something that is halfway watchable, then to take that clip or chunk or whatever and keep it on YouTube or somewhere, so that I'm creating a body of work where people at a later time can engage. And I am kind of hoping that if anyone does watch this, that I will be able to ask for your help in letting me know what I'm not clear about, what I could expand upon, what parts I've said are interesting or sound original or you'd like to hear more about. And then I could deliver a kind of recorded version of, a response to whatever you're asking or whatever you're interested in. And if it turns out to be good and you're like, great, then I'll just drop that onto YouTube or maybe drop that into my podcast. It's a little unclear right now because I've also got this podcast. I released an episode about 2 weeks ago, and I've been recording conversations with a few people, as I think I mentioned at the start. And I'm not totally sure if I'm going to post those conversations uncut to the podcast, uncut to YouTube. I mean, in a way it can't hurt, because if people are not interested, they can just not listen, which is what we do with most content. So I don't know why I'm so nervous about it, but I am nervous about it. And I am hoping to get this right, hoping to get some kind of interest in what I've been working on and what I've been learning and what I've been studying and what I've been writing about. And that's as a way both to make sure that what I'm talking about is somehow relevant to anyone other than my own weird brain. And also, to kind of create something that people can check out non-live, as in when I'm not in front of them or I'm not, so kind of live as a drafting stage, drafting in public. So I don't have much faith in my own ability to judge what is good, if I'm doing anything good, of my own stuff. And so I'm asking you as a viewer for help, I think. Okay, now I'm feeling kind of embarrassed, but I am going to stop this stream and thank you for watching. And if you want to know more, I kind of feel like Twitter is the main place to follow me. Twitter.com /BryanKam, BryanKam, and I will keep experimenting with this format.